Good evening, I'm Ryan Bonazzo. Welcome to Issues and Answers, the candidates' debate for those vying for the Thunder Bay Rainy River seat in the House of Commons. We have representatives from three of the parties on your ballot today. They are, in alphabetical order, Tracy McKinnon of the Green Party. We have Liberal Party candidate Marcus Pawlowski, and representing the NDP, Yuksem Wan. We have also reached out to Conservative hopeful Adelina Pecchia. She declined the invitation, citing a scheduling conflict. We will, however, hear a brief message from her later in the show. Before we get into the debate portion of the program, let's hear an opening statement from each of the candidates in attendance today, starting with Tracy McKinnon of the Green Party.
$600 million, the cost of this unnecessary election. This election could be the most important one in our history ever, with refugees, COVID, climate crisis, evacuees, heat waves, unnecessary long-term care home deaths, suicides, overdoses, poverty, all uncertainty for tomorrow. What is a life worth? Thousands of Indigenous children have been discovered in unmarked graves across Canada. How will we as a country atone for this cultural genocide? Now is the time to dismantle systemic racism. We can do better, much better. No more empty promises. Now is the time for bold action. Creating change takes hard work, commitment, collaboration, most of all education, and truth as part of reconciliation. Recent events have...
Thank you very much, Tracy McKinnon. Let's hear now from the incumbent, Marcus Pawlowski.
Hi, my name is Marcus Pawlowski. I was for a lot of years an emergency room doctor here in Thunder Bay. I've also worked for a number of years in either Indigenous communities or developing countries. I also have 2 law degrees, a public health degree, and worked for a number of years for World Health Organization. Now, during the pandemic, this wasn't a bad background to have because COVID was really the #1 political issue for the past couple of years. And I've closely followed every COVID issue, and I have to say I was the loudest voice in the Liberal Party over everything related to COVID. And I was willing to criticize all levels of government if I thought that criticism was due. But besides COVID, I've done a whole lot of other things, and after 2 years, I think I'm a better candidate than I was 2 years ago.
Thank you, Mr. Pawlowski. A few words now from the NDP's Yuksem Wan.
Thank you. In Thunder Bay Rainy River, this election has come down to 3 things: priorities, trust, and speaking up for the North. Justin Trudeau and his Liberals were arrogant enough to call the snap election putting a power play ahead of taking care of people. The Conservative candidate hasn't even bothered to attend any of the debates. In this riding, you deserve a representative that will show up and speak up. My track record is that I am present. I value the people in communities and want to see a Northern Ontario that prospers and thrives for many generations to come. I'm in it to see that our priorities are heard and addressed. I'm in it to fight for our economic recovery, the climate crisis, meaningful reconciliation, and to make sure we are not left behind. My name is Yuksem, and I'm in it for you.
Thank you, Ms. Wan, and to all of the candidates for their opening statements. When we return, we will begin the question and debate portion of the program. Issues and Answers. We'll be back right after this. Welcome back to Issues and Answers, the candidates debate for Thunder Bay Rainy River. During this portion of the program, I'll pose a direct question to one of the candidates. After allowing them some time to respond, we will then open that question up to the rest of the panel. Our first question goes to Green Party candidate Tracy McKinnon. As we enter the fourth wave of the pandemic, we've seen evidence along the campaign trail, both nationally and here in the Northwest, of a deep divide between those who believe that vaccine mandates are necessary and those who are staunchly opposed. Do you believe vaccine mandates are warranted? And how do we bridge the gap between those on both sides of the issue?
Of course, I'd have the hardest question right off. How to respond to that? So I made the personal choice for myself to get vaccinated. I understand and appreciate while others may not have made that choice. For me, as someone with health issues, that was my iron ring around myself so that I could go out and go to the grocery store and just do normal things.
Let's open that up to the floor. Who wants to weigh in? Vaccine mandates, are they necessary? Mr. Pawlowski.
I'm happy to, and I totally support the idea of mandating vaccine mandates. Businesses want them. For those of us, and most of us have been vaccinated now in Ontario, I think it's something like 75% have been fully vaccinated, 85% have been partially vaccinated. And I think for those of us who are fully vaccinated, we want to be able to go to a restaurant, want to be able to go to a bar, want to be able to go to the movie house and not worry about giving someone else COVID or getting COVID. And certainly the evidence is that and only 1% of the people currently in hospital right now are people who've been fully vaccinated. The chance of passing on the virus to someone else when you're fully vaccinated is much less. We hear a lot of the rights from the anti-vaxxers. But what about the rights of the other people? What about the rights of the rest of us who've been fully vaccinated? What about the rights of our kids to be able to go to school, the rights of businesses to stay open? And so I fully support if businesses want to, and our government's put $1 billion into this to help the provinces provide vaccine passports. I'm fully supportive. I think it's in all of our collective best interests.
Let's allow Ms. Wan to weigh in.
One of the things I think we're all seeing is this has become an election issue in a time where we should be spending it looking at processes, looking at all the sides, all the perspectives, making sure that we talk to Canadians, making sure that we provide them the information for the businesses, et cetera. I believe that the vaccine is the way that we've gotten through this, that we've been able to reopen our businesses, that we've been able to open the borders, start to travel inter-province, been able to restart living again. So what we need to do is make sure that there's a balance for the health of those who can get the vaccine and a balance for those who right now cannot. And we have to err on the side of caution.
Well, I would say, although we have to err on the side of caution, there's a duty of the government to look after its citizens. And some people, the vaccine doesn't work. People who, for example, are immunosuppressed, people who have transplants, people who are on cancer therapy. And it's the duty of the government to look after those sort of people. So we hear a lot from the anti-vaxxers and their rights, but we have to consider the rights of everybody in society.
Absolutely.
Tracy McKinnon, I want to make sure that you get equal time here, so any rebuttal?
I agree on Marcus's last point. We have to look out, we have to make it for everybody.
Well,
as much as possible.
if I could just add, this is an area where I'm glad to see, and I like to be nonpartisan, and I've actually worked with the NDP on this issue, and I think we all should be collectively looking after the health interests of our constituents, regardless of our party. So I'm glad to actually see we have a similar view on this.
Okay, excellent. This next question now, and Mr. Pawlowski, we'll go back to you. Your government has taken on massive amounts of debt during the pandemic. The spring budget released earlier this year projected a $354 billion deficit. Your party has also committed to extending key COVID-19 benefits into the fall. How do you support Canadians during this continued time of need without mortgaging the future?
Well, I think most economists agree that this isn't a time for austerity. This isn't a time to save money. And unfortunately, our colleagues here from the Conservative Party didn't bother to show up for this. But I think most economists believe that this is a time to spend money in order to stimulate the economy. We want to maintain jobs, and certainly a lot of the things we've done during COVID in terms of the economic provisions to help businesses, to help individuals get through the pandemic is help people to get through the pandemic. And yes, we've spent money, but what is the alternative? As one of my fellow members of Parliament said, what would you rather have? Either the government bears that debt or the individuals bear that debt, either in terms of businesses that have gone out of business or people who weren't able to look after their kids, pay their bills during the pandemic. And so we provided the CURB, the emergency business account, the wage subsidy, all those kind of things to help people get through it. Yes, we have a debt, but the alternative would be a lot worse.
All right, let's open that up to the floor now. Supporting Canadians while not taking on too much debt that we cannot afford. Ms. Wong.
I think that really when there's a couple of things is that, yes, we needed the investment into the communities, into the people, into the businesses to make it through a global health crisis like we've never seen before. We couldn't let people lose their homes, lose their, not be able to provide groceries, not be able to get the medication, et cetera, that they needed. We needed to support that. Going forward, what we need is to have a plan, and having the government and the individuals bear the debt is not a viable plan. What we need to do is make the rich, who got richer during the pandemic, make sure they're paying their fair share, right? We cannot spend money without having a plan to recoup it. And it shouldn't be on the backs of the people. It should be on the backs of those who made record profits and who are using the tax loopholes in order to not have their investment into the Canadian recovery be there. So I think it's absolutely about having that plan to tax the richest people in Canada, to have them pay their fair share.
Ryan, can I respond to that? So I would note that Thomas Mulcair, the previous leader of your party on CTV News, when he was talking...
But he's not here anymore.
Pardon me?
He's not here anymore.
He's not here anymore.
Yep.
Well, although good NDPer, former leader, and he said with respect to the platform of the NDP, which proposes $214 billion in spending, which is 3 times what the Liberals have proposed, his quote with respect to the fact that, well, we'll tax the rich and that'll take care of the problem. His quote was, and this was to CTV News, you can tax the BGGs out of billionaires, but there aren't enough billionaires to pay that bill.
Yeah, and you know what our economists have said?
One moment, Ms. Wong. Green Party candidate Tracy McKinnon, I want to give you a chance to weigh in here.
Can we let Yuck-Sum finish?
Yeah.
Then I can maybe pick up where
Sure.
she leaves off.
Sure. Ms. Wong.
One of the things, trying to quote Mulcair, in a time that is not when he was here, it's not when he's a leader now. Our leader now and our party now says, you know what, we've checked it out. We've looked at the loopholes. We've seen all the wealth that is hiding away from what is their fair share for Canadians, and that this is a plan that we can take on, and we will, because Canadians deserve better.
Perhaps Mulcair is unburdened by partisan politics now that he's out of it and says it as it is.
Tracy McKinnon, your thoughts?
Another way out of this pandemic would be an investment in the economy, and the Green Party have been advocating. They've had the basic income in some variation or another in their platform for many years, whether it be universal, whether it be targeted, whether it be basic. But this would be one huge step. That $600 million that was spent on this election, that would be, how many people like me living on poverty would that help? That would stimulate the economy greatly.
Any rebuttal from the floor? All right, we will move
Well,
on.
I guess let me just say, I think it's appropriate, and when it comes to spending, the Conservatives didn't think we should have done all the things that we did to help businesses and individuals get through COVID. On the other hand, the NDP called our $400 billion budget this year an austerity budget. I think the right ground is the middle ground, which believes that there are limits on government, and there ought to be limits on government spending, but that we do need to spend when it's in our long-term best interest to spend, and I think certainly at the moment it's in our long-term best interest to spend to keep the economy going and viable.
Ms. Wong, I want to give you a chance to respond to what Mr. Pawlowski just said, if you so choose.
Yeah, it's nice that we agree. Canadians need support. The thing that we need to understand is that it shouldn't be on the backs of Canadians to have to pay that back. And I think the NDP have always shown that we know where that money is, and it's a matter of priority, taking it, not giving it to pipelines, not giving it to subsidies for big ones, using that money, putting it there, and making sure that we're taxing those who aren't paying their fair share.
All right, let's move on now, and this next question is for Ms. Wong. Your party's platform features the most ambitious climate targets outside of the Green Party, and while most people agree that we must now transition to a greener economy, how can voters be sure that your plan won't place the financial burden of that transition squarely onto their shoulders?
I think we showed that when we opposed, and we were very vocal about the $1.6 billion that was invested back in 2018-19 into a pipeline. How can you say that climate is one of your priorities and you want to do that when you take money from the people and buy an old pipeline, right? We need to, in our green economy, we are investing in new technology, in research, in communities, in people, in jobs, especially here in Northwestern Ontario, where we have the most land, water, and the best air, other than the summer with the forest fires. But we should be able to use that as part of pilot projects and be leaders and stewards for the land with climate, making sure that we're taking care and protecting our land and water, but at the same time moving forward into an economy that really values and respects the climate for a planet, so that there's a planet left for future generations.
Tracy McKinnon, this question is right in your party's wheelhouse. We're talking about climate and climate policies that don't put the financial burden squarely onto individual Canadians. Your thoughts?
Climate change is here. Climate change is real. Climate change is already impacting our communities, and we need you to help us implement resilient measures to keep them safe. Nearly 600 people died in a sudden death from the extreme heat in BC in just 1 week this summer. That is more than the number of people who died in BC during the deadliest month of the pandemic. As hundreds of forest fires burn across Canada, crops wither in the field and the prairies, marine life bakes in the sun, people in Canada are experiencing firsthand the destructive impacts on our warming planet in real time. We've been given an alarm bell to act on climate change. Now is the time.
Mr. Pawlowski, I will give you a moment to respond, but first, Tracy McKinnon, obviously very true points. But how do we pay for that, and who pays for that? Is it Canadians? Is it the government? What is the plan?
I think it was already mentioned about taxing the rich. I think that's one way forward. To cancel these pipelines, as was mentioned, implementing a basic income that would be, that would put more economy into that would move more monies into the economy, more education, more skilled trades. We have the scientists. They come up with this platform. They know the climate is changing.
Mr. Pawlowski, I want to give you a chance to respond before we head to break.
Well, first of all, let me compliment the Green Party, because I think they were at the forefront in fighting this issue and blazed the trail for the rest of us to follow. So they've done a great job. Given the recent Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change's report on climate change, which certainly painted a dire picture if we don't respond quicker, this has to be, and I think is probably the major issue at the moment. But as, Ryan, for your contention that the NDP has the most ambitious plan, I don't know if that's the case, and I'm not sure if it's the most realistic either. And my understanding is that the NDP plan contains a quarter of our plan does, but what our plan has. They've, for instance, said that they would get to 50% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions compared to 2005, compared to our plan, I think, envisions 40-something, but they haven't said how. As people within our party, like Stephen Guilbeault, who's quite a well-known environmentalist, has said, well, the NDP plan, you open the hood and there's nothing under the hood. And to quote, for example, former Green BC leader Andrew Weaver, he sang the praises of the Liberal plan and said it was bold and thoughtful and the only credible option put forth by any party. Thomas Mulcair, again, unfortunately, he's not he's not been your best friend lately, but he called our plan a marvelous plan.
Ms. Won, I do feel inclined to let you briefly respond to that. We are over time. We do have to head to break, but briefly your response.
All right, right. You know, fuel subsidies, you want solutions, ending the fuel subsidies, making sure that we don't let big polluters off the hook, cutting emissions by more than half, you know, and investing in the jobs. I think that's a plan that everybody can sign on to.
Thank you very much, candidates. Obviously a very important issue. We will take a short break now and be back with more questions and debate as Issues and Answers continues. Welcome back to Issues and Answers, the candidates debate for Thunder Bay Rainy River. Our next question goes to Green Party candidate Tracy McKinnon. Municipalities across this region are struggling to deal with the housing and homelessness crisis. What do you believe is the role of the federal government to support those communities trying to tackle the problem?
I'll go back to the basic income or some form of basic income or universal income or targeted income, that would give people enough money to be able to afford a roof over their head. I know myself, my rent's going up in January. That's not something I can really afford. The Green Party has had this plan in place, or had this system, basic income in the platform. That could be the way out through this recovery. That could be the way, give people money to invest in their economy, to invest in their community. When we invest in the community, we invest in each other. When we invest in each other, the community benefits. Housing is an important piece, same as poverty. The pandemic has brought to light many issues locally, globally, nationally.
All right, let's open the question up now to the other candidates on the floor. Helping communities deal with housing and homelessness. Who'd like to weigh in first?
You, Sam, you go ahead.
So housing and affordability are two of the top issues, that we're hearing about, especially here in the north, where our rent has doubled. We have, young adults who are trying to, are starting their careers who can't afford a home and are trying to decide whether or not they stay in the north or they try and move somewhere else. So one of the ways that we have to address that is to increase the amount of houses that are available. That's rental units, social housing. We need to increase the opportunity for jobs, and our plan with the climate, our addressing the climate and the green technology is that we do have all that training, investment into retrofitting older houses, making sure that there is that space for people to be able to afford a home and afford to stay in Northern Ontario.
Mr. Pawlowski.
No, I would say there's two aspects to this question. One is the problem with the homelessness. Two is making houses affordable for everybody. And even people who have really good incomes are having trouble affording houses in places like Toronto and Vancouver. So certainly on the basis of homelessness, our government has put a lot of money into that, and apparently we've helped over 1 million people access some sort of housing. As to helping people to afford homes, our strategy is pretty good, and we started the first national housing strategy a number of years ago and committed $72 billion over 10 years to that. And we've helped 2 million people either to be able to afford homes or to rent the homes. Now, there's a number of things that we put in the present budget because I think it's really considered to be one of the key planks in our platform is helping people to afford houses. So there's things, for example, the tax-free first-time home ownership plan, which basically creates something like a RRSP where you can put money in that's tax-free. Another program to allow people to transition from rent to buying a home. There's a new program for a Bill of Rights for homeowners, which includes ending blind bidding. So we've got a whole bunch of things in our platform to try to do, like the NDP does, wanting to provide affordable housing, because we all agree on that. The opposition, who maybe doesn't agree with it, didn't bother to show up.
Ms. Wong, do you want to jump in?
And that's it. It's making sure that we have access for fast startup funds, so that when people want to build their houses, when they want to build rental units, especially on First Nations as well, the affordability and housing crisis, we can't talk about it just here in Thunder Bay. We have to talk about it right across the region. And to have the investment in those communities, we have to access the funds. We have to make sure that they have the ability for immediate relief to really get that going, to be able to keep the people in the communities and have those houses for them.
If I could reply to that, no, I'm reluctant to attack the NDP, especially since we have basically the same goals, but this is an election and only one person gets elected. So in response to the NDP's platform on housing, let me quote Nick Felvo, former director of research at Calgary Homelessness Foundation, not Thomas Mulcair this time, but somebody who I think is pretty left of center. And he said about the NDP platform, he said the NDP housing platform is short on details and contains surprisingly little on addressing long-term homelessness.
You know what?
So that,
Quoting-
again, like you open the hood and what's there?
Quoting other people instead of addressing the issues here in Northwestern Ontario and me as a candidate, and just, you know, I think that we need to hear what you think about the housing, what you think about these issues, not just quoting someone that was written in a book.
We have a very extensive platform, and I can quote the plan is to 250,000 new homes a year over the next 4 years. I mean, there's a lot of written stuff, but I'm quoting somebody who supposedly is fairly nonpartisan in their because obviously we're all going to be partisan, but here's somebody who I think is perhaps neutral, and they're assessing like our plan versus the NDP plan. So.
I want to hear again from Green Party candidate Tracy McKinnon. You haven't spoken on this issue in a while.
Adequate housing is a fundamental right. Even before the pandemic, 1.6 million Canadians lived in unstable, unsuitable, inadequate, or unaffordable housing. And an estimated 2.4 million households experienced core housing needs in 2020. On any given night, 35,000 Canadians may be experiencing homelessness. Women, low-income workers, Black and Indigenous people, people with disabilities, and people of color have been among the hardest hit by income and job loss during the pandemic and continue to fall further and further behind. A Green government will declare housing affordability and homelessness a national emergency, redefine affordable housing using a better, updated formula that accounts for regional variations across the country, immediately appoint the Federal Housing Advocate as established in the National Housing Strategy Act.
Well, and I would be remiss if I didn't pick up on something that you've said a couple of times now, and that's about a basic income plan. And I'll throw this question out to anyone who would care to answer it. Thunder Bay was part of a provincial pilot that was canceled prematurely by the Ford government. Should there be a federal plan in place to replace it? Who cares to respond?
I think absolutely. Here in Thunder Bay, I was working at the college, and I saw the impact and the hope that that project gave to people right across Northern Ontario. They had the ability to then, you know, instead of worrying about the rising cost of rent, of childcare, you know, all those barriers that kept them from going to school, from getting jobs, etc. The basic income really supported them in a limited time to be able to get their feet on the ground, start building up their life, and have hope that in the future they won't have to live in poverty and homelessness. When the Ford government, when the Conservatives shut that down, it devastated people. They had signed up for leases, they had made tuition payments, they had started studying and working, and then all of a sudden that let them down. To be able to have a government that believes in giving people help and hope, I think is something fundamental that we need as Canadians.
Mr. Pawlowski, there was broad support for this at the Liberal Party convention. Should there be a federal basic income plan?
Well, I think this is the typical Liberal quandary here because, yes, and I think that it has a lot of support, but there also, I think the Liberals being somewhat in the middle politically, you have to consider is this affordable and is this ultimately desirable? And I am myself not yet decided whether this is a good idea or not. I think really you want to encourage people to work. That's one thing I absolutely believe in. If people can work, they ought to be working. And for people in minimal paying jobs, and I think part of the problem some people face is you're on welfare, you get a whole bunch of benefits, but then you get employed, then you lose those benefits. So there isn't a lot of incentive for you to get off welfare and get employed. So, so on the other hand, if you could top that salary up and make life more affordable for them, and it was economically viable and sustainable, then yes, I think that's better than having people on welfare or not working.
Very quickly, Tracy McKinnon, you've already expressed your position on this, but any last words to say on this before we head to break?
10% of people live in poverty and do not have access to a standard of living adequate for health and well-being. And that came from the Universal Declaration of Human Rights.
Well, thank you very much, candidates. We will be back once again after a short break with issues and answers. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Issues and Answers, the candidates debate for Thunder Bay Rainy River. Our next question goes to Mr. Pawlowski. The Liberal government pledged back in 2015 to end all boil water advisories in First Nation communities within 5 years. That timeline has come and gone, and still many Indigenous adults have never experienced clean drinking water in their homes. Why should they give your party another chance to fulfill that promise?
Because I think we'll get it done. I think that's the biggest reason. And I know I've worked as a doctor a lot of years in developing countries. I've worked a few years in Indigenous countries, and I see UQSM looking over at me accusingly. I know that not having potable water, drinkable water, should be a third world problem. But unfortunately, it's also a problem in Indigenous communities. And I think our government has absolutely made this a priority, and we've put $4 billion into trying to alleviate those long-term water boil advisories. There was, when we came into power in 2015, 105 long-term water advisories. We have now addressed and alleviated 109. So the math doesn't quite add up there, because in fact, we now have 59 more water advisories, long-term water advisories still in existence. But for each of those, there already is a plan, and there is a process underway to solve all of those problems. Our government's put $4 billion in now. We're putting in a further $2 billion, and I know my best friend in caucus is Jaime Batiste, head of Indigenous Caucus, and I have absolute faith that our party puts Indigenous issues as a priority. We will do our best, but right now I have to say the impediments are technical. I probably run out of my 1 minute. But
Yeah, we're going to open that up to the other candidates on the floor here. Ms. Wan, you seem like you want to jump in.
I would definitely like to jump in. Like I said before, this was a priority in 2015. It was a priority in 2019. And now it's a priority, and they want another chance to get it done. We'll do our best. We put $4 billion in. Obviously, what you're doing is not good enough. We are in 2021, and there is still a boil water advisory, and you said in 59. Jagmeet Singh was in the Shkandiga this weekend, again, looking and facing the people in those communities, the ones with sores, the ones that have never had safe drinking water, the ones where the mother had to go and her daughter asked her, why can't we even get clean water? Why don't they even care? Her mother went for a walk to go and get that water. When she came back, her daughter had committed suicide. That's what we learned about this weekend. There is not another chance. There is not a time to do your best when your best clearly hasn't been good enough.
if I can respond, and this is the NDP, it's political slogans and cliches. You're not doing enough. We could do better. But here's the reality: the problems with a lot of places are technical. The problem
It's
is
a matter of priorities, and it's not a matter of technicalities. When it's a priority, you've gone through all the technicalities and made it happen. You bought a pipeline. You made that happen. But boil water advisories can't. And this is not one that I am willing to stay silent on and wait.
Having been in the Liberal Party for 2 years and having criticized where I think appropriate my own party over things, I can say with absolute conviction the problem with long-term water advisories is not one of willpower, which is what the NDP says. Well, you guys don't really want to do it. This isn't a priority for you. Absolutely, it's a priority for us. And I can say that, having spent the last 2 years as a member of Parliament and having dealt with people.
24 MPs?
Candidates, I have to give Tracy McKinnon a chance to weigh in on this issue.
The Green government will ensure that all First Nations are thoroughly involved in the development and design of UNDRIP implementation legislation. The Green Party of Canada is committed to reconciliation, nation-to-nation engagement, and self-determination for Indigenous people. The whole Nisga'a, as I said last week in the debate, this is Canada. This is 2021. We're not in a third world country. Why do we have these third world issues?
You know what? The 24 MPs that sit in Parliament with you, the 24 NDP, they also know that, you know what? It's a matter of willpower and a matter of making it a priority. And they don't agree that the Liberals have.
I don't think it is a matter of willpower. The NDP's approach is like shout louder and it'll get done. No, I mean, the reality is, and I've heard this from people who actually work on those water systems, is there isn't one, everyone isn't using the pipes, same pumps, the same systems. And so when there's a breakdown of the water system and a pump in a community, the people in Thunder Bay have no idea what kind of pump they're using. They have to send somebody up there, figure out what the problem is, what kind of equipment they're using, come back to Thunder Bay. And so it's technical. It's not a matter, and like the NDP things, just shout louder and you'll find a solution.
Excuses that we haven't got it done in 2021.
Well, right. Unfortunately, the NDP lives in a world of theory. We lived in a world of actual practice and getting things done.
Candidates, we have to move on now. Our next question goes to Yuksem Wan. Residents across this region continue to see their tax bills go up and up just to maintain essential municipal services like EMS, fire, and police. How do you plan to make life more affordable for people in this riding?
I think really to make life more affordable, we have to look at the long-term impact of the investments we make. If we invest in something like pharmacare, in mental health, in improving our healthcare system, that money will actually come back and help each of us, as well as our businesses and a country as a whole. Pharmacare, for example, if we take that money, that's $600 on average that every family can save per year. If they had a plan that would pay for their medication, businesses would be saving money because then they don't have to pay for the benefits. Everyone would have access to that. As Canadians get healthier, then we also see that our communities get healthier, and all of a sudden we have that money to invest in the things that are important, the infrastructure, to pay our bills, to pay our rent, things like that. So it all comes around, but we have to make that right investment and make sure that it's about people and communities and affordability, not just subsidies for the big businesses so they can make more profits.
Tracy McKinnon, I've seen you nodding along to some of those answers. What are your thoughts?
I think that's the way that's in the Green Party platform, expanding universal programs, post-secondary, pharmacare, dental care, and childcare. We need to invest in, as I said this before, we need to invest in the economy, in the community, and then the community can invest in the economy. Another great way would be to implement some form of basic income, a universal income, to give everyone a guaranteed minimum amount to live on. That way they can pay for their medications, they can pay for the childcare, they can pay for the post-secondary. I know myself, I've had to not fill prescriptions because they can't afford them, because that's poverty.
Mr. Pawlowski, affordability, municipal services, emergency services continue to go up, as do taxes.
Well, one thing, and this is where maybe the Liberals part a little bit with the NDP, is the government can only do so much, and certainly part of making life affordable, a better life for people, is having a positive environment for businesses to come to. And certainly the NDP has historically been somewhat hostile to the interests of things like corporations.
I don't
So
think
certainly
that's fair.
What's that?
I really don't think that's fair to say that we've been hostile to businesses. We support small businesses, we support medium-sized and building in Canada.
I think part of the solution in terms of a lot of Thunder-Bay's problems, whether it's the drugs, the gangs, or so many of our social problems, is having a healthy economy and having people employed. And certainly I've done that during my time in Parliament and brought jobs to Thunder Bay, for example, with Alstom. But we can't, and I think sometimes the NDP forget this, is that part of the solution is encouraging business and businesses to invest in Canada. So the second thing we've done as a party, a whole bunch of things to make life more affordable. We did reduce taxes under the previous government for middle income earners. We started the Canada Child benefit, which can bring in up to $6,000 per child for those in the lowest income brackets. Also, very importantly, we've in the last budget committed $40 billion to make daycare affordable and bring in $10 a day daycare, which I think is exceedingly important. So
on childcare, if I can, when I had my first son, he's 26 years old now. When I had my first son, I remember the Liberals promising childcare. And I was like, that's going to be awesome, because you know what? That will make a difference in my life. My granddaughter is 2 now, and she's still hearing you guys promise that you're going to be getting the childcare. And within 5 years, when they no longer need it, we need to make sure that comes into effect now, not sometime in the future after the next election.
I think on that point, if you look back to 2004 or something, it was a Liberal plan to introduce affordable daycare, and the NDP sided with the Conservative to bring down the Liberal government, to bring in Harper.
No. It's not about taking down the government. It's about making sure that we have policies that take care of people, and when you lose your compass and you make a nice promise and you don't hold to it, that's when people hold you accountable.
You and the NDP helped bring down the Liberal
Me
government.
and the NDP.
Me and the NDP brought down the Liberal government.
You know what? The Liberal government brings themselves down, especially when they call in elections and put that first.
Candidates, I have to let Green Party candidate Tracy McKinnon in.
Absolutely.
I'm happy to let
your thoughts on what you've heard here over the past couple of minutes.
I totally agree with you.
You be the arbiter. You bring the solution here.
And the whole,
Sorry? Go ahead.
and what part?
Oh, just your thoughts on what you've heard.
No,
over
I
the
agree
past
totally
couple
with you,
minutes.
Aksum.
What?
We need a change in government.
I disagree with that.
All right, very quickly, and I'm going to open this question up to everyone on the floor. Mr. Pawlowski, you did mention gangs and drugs in your previous answer, so that leads me to a problem that's been spanning across the region, and that is guns and gangs, particularly right here in Thunder Bay. The federal government provided $65 million to Ontario to combat the issue back in 2019. Thunder Bay didn't receive any of that money, and the province and the problem persists today. So for any of the candidates here, how do we ensure that communities like Thunder Bay receive adequate funding to combat this issue?
We saw this issue this weekend when there was a shooting in Westport. That's unacceptable. The fact that we didn't have a voice, making sure that our reality was heard and that we didn't have someone to fight for the North, I think that's part of the problem. We need to have someone who's willing to speak up, who's passionate about the North, who wants to make sure that our realities, especially with gangs and guns, it's not about responsible ownership. This is about the criminality and making sure that the North has the support and the services, the resources we need to be strong.
Very quickly, we're up against a break. Mr. Pawlowski.
You need a strong voice, and you know what? I think I have been that voice. I'll even speak up against my own party if I don't agree with what we're doing. And certainly there isn't any easy answers to the guns and gangs problem, but I will be there looking after the interests of people in Thunder Bay.
Thank you very much, candidates. That brings to an end the formal debate portion of our show. There are two other candidates on the ballot in this riding. Let's hear now from Conservative candidate Adelina Pecchia.
Hi, my name is Adelina Pecchia, and I'm the candidate for the Conservative Party of Canada for the Thunder Bay Rainy River riding. I am here back home on my home territory. This is where I grew up. This is the city that I love. And I'm here to run as an MP because I care about the unemployment rate in this city. I care about small businesses that are closing their doors or thinking that they're going to close their doors because they cannot get people to work. I'm here because we want to renew and create new jobs. I'm here because people don't even have clean drinking water in some places. I'm here because I care about you. Vote for me, Adelina, Conservative Party.
And finally, before we take a quick break, let's take a look at Alan Abbott, who's representing the People's Party of Canada.
Hi, I'm Alan Abbott. I'm the candidate for the People's Party of Canada to represent the Thunder Bay Rainy River riding. This is my opportunity to give you a bit of a sense of what I stand for or where I want to go, that our country right now is in desperate need of getting back to where we were 30 years ago, where there was respect for everybody, we showed responsibility for what we did, there was fairness and freedom. We had freedom, and we've lost that recently, and the only party that's talking about it is the People's Party of Canada. And that's the message I have for you.
Stay tuned. We'll return with closing statements from our candidates here in the studio. Welcome back to Issues and Answers, the candidates debate for Thunder Bay Rainy River. Before we conclude our program, let's hear some final words from each of the candidates in attendance. We will start with Green Party candidate Tracy McKinnon.
Recent events have opened our eyes to injustices and social inequities. Systemic discrimination long predates the many marches, rallies, protests over the years. The Green Party understands that systemic discrimination comes in many forms, and it seeks to combat in every arena through Indigenous self-determination, providing a fair deal for youth, tackling identity-based hate, and ensuring that the creation of a just society is at the center of all decisions made. The Green Party recognizes the ongoing leadership, resistance, and resilience of Indigenous peoples in the system oppression and intergenerational trauma. The Green Party will support all Indigenous peoples' efforts to emerge from the positions of disadvantage in which Canada has placed them. The Green Party affirms its support of the 94 recommendations of the TRC report and all 94 calls of action.
Thank you very much. Mr. Pawlowski, the floor is yours.
First, let me say I've enjoyed this. Second, as for the Conservatives not showing up, they say they want to do better for Thunder Bay, but they can't even bother to show up at any of the debates. Like, what kind of member of parliament is that, and how are they going to represent us in Ottawa? We've had a whole hour to criticize each other. I want to do the opposite and just thank the other two candidates. I know it was, for me, one of the hardest decisions of my life to run. Suddenly you're in the spotlight and everything you do is in the spotlight. And I know you both have kids like me. It's hard on your families. And so whatever happens, I want to thank you for the work you did and for standing up for what you believe in. And I wish you luck in the future.
Thank you, Mr. Pawlowski. Yes, all of the candidates deserve to be commended, that is for sure. Ms. Wan, what would you like to say to voters?
Thank you. You know, Canadians have been flipping from red to blue every election, but we can't keep flipping the same coin and expecting different results. We know that the North is different. We can vote for a representative that puts Northern Ontario first. Through this pandemic, we have felt the impact of a system that lets big businesses make record profits while we struggled to pay our bills and try to make it through. We lost loved ones, our businesses were devastated, and we needed a voice for Northwestern Ontario. We deserve to have investments into our communities, to have businesses up proper, and to have a good place to raise our families. We need someone that puts taking care of people ahead of power and control, and we need someone who shows up and speaks up. My name is Yuxam.
Well, thank you once again to all of the candidates for putting their names forward to represent the people of Thunder Bay Rainy River. And thank you for watching. Hopefully this debate gave you a clearer idea of who you would like to vote for on Monday. Yes, it's coming up, and no matter who the candidate is who best represents your interests, get out and vote. Thank you very much. See you next time.